I was born into a family of teachers, and the atmosphere at home was very serious. You couldn't talk or smack your lips while eating, and after getting up, you had to fold the quilt into a tofu block. Before the age of 18, you couldn't read extracurricular books, and there were countless other strict requirements like these. One day after school, I was inexplicably drawn into an arcade with my classmates, but was unexpectedly discovered by my older brother, who attended the same school. He went home and told my parents about me going to the arcade, and after a double-team beatdown, my parents decided to send me to Anderson's electrotherapy class for complete correction. The next time I saw them was 3 years later. Walking out of the Anderson Correction Center gate, the sunlight was so blinding I couldn't open my eyes. The 3 years felt like a long eclipse. My parents and Julian were standing next to a black sedan. My mother, dressed in a presentable suit, saw me. Her smile stiffened for a moment, then she forced it to widen. "Ava, you're out, let Mom take a look at you." She wanted to hug me, but my body instinctively recoiled. Her hand hung in the air, her eyes unable to hide the awkwardness. My father just frowned, scrutinizing me from head to toe. "Why is your hair so yellow? And you've gotten so skinny you're unrecognizable." Julian was standing at the back. He was now a psychology graduate student at a prestigious university, wearing a well-tailored suit and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look refined. He pushed up his glasses, a victor's smile on his face. "Mom, Dad, don't rush her. Ava just got out. She needs an adjustment period. See, isn't she much more obedient now?" He walked over and naturally put his arm around my shoulder. My whole body stiffened, and I couldn't stop trembling. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, in a voice only we could hear. "Ava, welcome home. See, I told you this would be good for you." I looked down at the ill-fitting old shoes on my feet and said nothing. Not that I didn't want to, but I couldn't. The 3 years of correction had almost deprived me of my ability to speak. On the way home, Mom chattered on and on about the changes that had taken place in the last 3 years. She talked about how outstanding Julian was, how many scholarships he had won, and how he had become the pride of their entire family. Dad occasionally chimed in, and the topic never strayed from Julian. I was like a transparent piece of luggage, stuffed into the corner of the back seat. Dinner was as lavish as if it were New Year's. At the dinner table, the same rule still applied, no talking while eating. I reached for a piece of ribs with trembling hands, but the chopsticks disobeyed and fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The eyes of the whole family instantly focused on me. Dad's face immediately darkened, and words of reprimand were on the tip of his tongue. But Julian spoke first, his tone gentle. "Dad, don't blame Ava. She's just not used to it yet." He bent down, picked up the chopsticks, wiped them carefully with a paper napkin, and placed them next to my bowl. Then he picked up the piece of ribs and, like feeding a small child, held it out to my mouth. "Ava, open your mouth. Julian will feed you." I looked at him, his eyes behind the lenses full of pity and triumph, as if I wasn't his sister, but a living specimen to prove he was always right. I didn't open my mouth, but silently turned my head away. 5 more years passed. I was like a ghost in the house, quietly existing in every corner. During the day, when Mom and Dad went to work, I would sit by the window and watch the clouds. When they came home in the evening, I would lock myself in my room. In these 5 years, Julian's life had been on a winning streak. He had become a famous young psychologist in Jinghai City, a regular on television, and a savior for countless families with wayward children. The core of his theory was the necessity of family intervention, and I was the most successful intervention case in his words. He never mentioned me by name, but everyone knew that he had a sister who had once gone astray, and was later saved by her family. Today was Julian's engagement day with Isabella, the daughter of the city's leading enterprise. The banquet hall was dazzling with lights, and the guests were numerous. Mom and Dad were radiant, arm in arm with Julian, like a king and queen surveying their territory. I was ordered to attend. Mom had picked out a white dress for me, intending to make me look pure and harmless. But I was pale and thin, and wearing it made me look more like a walking skeleton. I was placed in the most inconspicuous corner, the plate in front of me piled high with food, but I couldn't eat a bite. "That's Professor Julian's sister, isn't it? I heard she used to be very rebellious and almost went bad." "Yes, look at her now, so quiet. It seems that Professor Julian's parenting methods really work." She just looks a little dull. Did they overdo the treatment? Shu, keep your voice down. The whispers were like mosquitoes, buzzing in my ears. During the toast, Julian and his beautiful fiancée, Isabella, came to our table. He raised his glass, full of high spirits. Mom, Dad, thank you. Without your wise decisions back then, I wouldn't be where I am today, and our family wouldn't be where it is today. Dad's eyes were tearful, and he patted Julian on the shoulder excitedly. Good son, you're Dad's pride. Mom was already weeping with joy. Isabella's eyes fell on me, and she looked at me with kind curiosity. She squatted down and asked me gently, Ava, I've heard Julian mention you many times. Are you okay lately? I looked at her, my lips moved, but no sound came out. Julian immediately laughed and smoothed things over. Isabella, Ava likes quiet, let's not bother her. He pulled Isabella up and turned to the others, saying, My sister is just introverted, but she has a good foundation. This is all thanks to our family for discovering the problem in time and taking the most correct measures. His eyes swept over me, with a hint of warning, as if saying you better stay quiet forever. Isabella looked back at me, her eyes filled with pity. She probably thought I was just a poor sister who was overprotected and had some social difficulties. She didn't know that my quiet was my only resistance. A few days after the engagement banquet, Julian suddenly called a family meeting. He took out a proposal, titled Metamorphosis, a public lecture on memory and rebirth. He planned to hold a large-scale psychology lecture a month later in the auditorium of Jinghai University. The core of the lecture would be to use a state-of-the-art neural synapse imager, imported from abroad to project my memories in real time. This device can accurately capture memory images from the cerebral cortex and convert them into visual images. I will guide Ava, starting from her most chaotic period, all the way back to her recovery process. Julian's tone was full of excitement. This will be a revolutionary demonstration. It will show everyone that so-called internet addiction and rebellion are not incurable diseases. As long as the method is appropriate, any wayward child can be pulled back. And you, Ava, he turned his gaze to me. You will become a symbol of an era, a role model of rebirth from the ashes. Dad was thrilled. Good. This is a great idea. We, the Lee family, want to contribute to society. Mom hesitated. But showing Ava's memories in public, will it? Mom, what are you worried about? Julian interrupted her. We'll only show the positive memories after correction, showing how she gets better day by day. The bad, chaotic ones will of course be skipped. Everything is under my control. He looked at me like a director looking at his actor. This is for your own good, Ava. This is also an opportunity for you to repay your family and society. My heart suddenly convulsed. Alarm bells rang in my brain. Those sealed, dark, blood and tear-stained images instantly burst through the floodgates. No. A hoarse, almost unfamiliar word squeezed out of my throat. I couldn't help but tremble, holding my head with my hands, my body curled into a ball. No. No. This was my first time resisting so violently in 5 years. Dad's face instantly turned livid. He rushed over and grabbed my arm. Ava, what's wrong with you again? How much effort has your brother put into you? And you still want to be ungrateful? Dad. Julian immediately rushed over to stop him, his face wearing that familiar expression of pity. Don't scare her. See, her stress response is still so strong. This just proves she needs a thorough desensitization. Only by confronting the past can she truly move on. He squatted down, trying to take my hand, but I violently shook him off. Ava, be good. Trust your brother. Your brother wouldn't hurt you. His voice was as gentle as poison. Looking at his hypocritical face, at my parents' matter-of-course expressions, a chilling despair rushed from the soles of my feet to the crown of my head. They weren't trying to heal me. They wanted to take the last bit that belonged to me, my only remaining, shattered soul, and put it under the spotlight, to display it, to weigh it, to use it as a stepping stone for Julian's success. A month passed in the blink of an eye. They treated me like a lifeless puppet, taking me to the auditorium of Jinghai University. The seats below the stage were fully occupied. There were leading figures in the field of psychology, media reporters, students and parents who had come out of admiration. Julian, dressed in a white suit, stood center stage, the spotlight shining on him, making him look like an angel descended from heaven. He was giving a passionate speech. Many people ask me, Professor Julian, what's your secret to success? I say it's love, but even more so, it's determination. When I discovered my only sister, addicted to the violence and emptiness of the virtual world, my heart was broken. But having a broken heart isn't enough. We must act. I persuaded my parents that we must use the most decisive means to pull her back from the brink. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, their eyes wet with tears, their faces showing pride and emotion. Today I am honored to have my sister, Ava, with me. She will join me in completing this journey of breaking out of the cocoon. All eyes immediately turned to me. I was wearing that white dress, sitting in a wheelchair. Mom said I wasn't feeling well today and was afraid I would fall if I went on stage. 2 nurses walked over and pushed me onto the stage. Julian walked over to me, took my hand, and raised it high. Everyone, look, this is the butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Another round of applause. I looked at the sea of people below the stage, their faces filled with curiosity, sympathy, and approval. No one saw the fear in my eyes. A man in a white coat pushed a uniquely shaped instrument onto the stage. This was the neural synapse imager that Julian had mentioned. He personally came over and carefully attached dozens of cold electrode patches to my scalp, one by one. Don't be afraid, Ava, he whispered in my ear, in a voice only I could hear. It will be over soon. Just sit here and don't do anything. Leave the rest to your brother. Remember, don't act crazy like last time, or it won't look good for any of us. I closed my eyes, my whole body ice cold. The giant screen behind the stage lit up, displaying a complex brainwave diagram. Julian picked up the microphone, his voice steady and magnetic. Now let's witness together a journey of spiritual rebirth. We will start from the beginning of the treatment and see how science and care create miracles. He pressed the start button on the controller. The brainwave diagram on the screen fluctuated violently, and then a blurry image gradually became clear. It wasn't the bright, clean psychology consultation room that Julian had described. It was a windowless confinement room, only 4 feet square. The walls were covered in mold and fingernail scratches. A man in a white coat had his back to the camera, his shadow elongated by the light, cast on the ground, like a giant spider. He slowly turned around, holding a syringe with a cold, gleaming needle in his hand. The audience instantly fell silent, everyone holding their breath. Dad suddenly stood up from his seat, his face drained of color, his voice trembling. Julian, what is this? Dear. Anderson told us back then it would only be talk therapy and low-frequency pulse therapy. Julian's smile froze on his face. He stared fixedly at the screen, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Dad. You sit down first. This is probably a sedative procedure before the treatment. Yes, just to calm the patient down. It's scientific. He tried to maintain his composure, to stabilize the situation, then picked up the controller, his fingers flying across it, trying to skip this scene. Let's fast forward a bit, and go straight to the rehabilitation training. However, the image on the screen didn't change at all. Instead, it became even clearer. The man called Dr. Anderson smiled grimly and walked towards the girl huddled in the corner. That girl was me at 18. Not listening? Dr. Anderson said. It's okay, 1 shot of obedience water and you'll be good. The scene changed. I was being dragged by 2 strong men and strapped to a cold metal bed. My wrists and ankles were tightly bound with leather restraints. Dr. Anderson, holding 2 electrodes, walked towards me step by step. The crackling sound of electricity spread through the auditorium through the speakers. On the screen, my body was convulsing violently, my throat emitting inhuman screams. Yellow liquid flowed between my legs. Below the stage, a young girl screamed and covered her mouth. Mom cried out, and her legs gave way, slumping into her seat, her face as pale as paper. No. This isn't real. Julian completely panicked. He rushed to the instrument and frantically slapped it, trying to make it stop. Stop. Stop it. It's malfunctioning. But the instrument seemed to have a life of its own, faithfully playing the darkest memories from the depths of my mind. The images didn't stop. Scene after scene, incident after incident, as clear as if they had happened yesterday. I was locked in a confinement room, without food for 3 days and 3 nights, until I was so hungry that I gnawed at the wall. I was forced to copy the standards for students, over and over again, and for every word I wrote wrong, I would be hit on the palms with a ruler until my fingers were swollen and I couldn't hold a pen. I saw myself on the screen, my eyes changing from the initial stubbornness, to anger, to fear, and finally, only a numb emptiness remained. The auditorium was deathly silent, with only the sound of heavy breathing. Those experts and scholars who had previously been full of praise now looked grave. The reporters had smelled a sensational news story, and the flashbulbs were flashing like crazy. My God, this isn't therapy, this is abuse. That Anderson Correction Center, I've heard of it, I never thought it was like this inside. Julian said it was scientific intervention? Is this what he calls science? The sounds of discussion came like a tide, crashing against Julian. His face was ashen, standing in the center of the stage, as if he had been stripped naked, exposed to everyone's gaze. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but couldn't say a word. The images on the screen continued. It was a collective gratitude, assembly. A dozen or so emaciated boys and girls, like myself, were required to kneel on the ground and kowtow to a picture of Dr. Anderson. Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for saving our dirty souls. Thank you, parents, for sending us to this pure land. The slogans were uniform and apathetic. One boy, because the sound of his kowtow wasn't loud enough, was dragged out by 2 instructors. Soon, the sound of wailing and beatings came from the next room. I knelt in the crowd, my head down, my body shaking like a leaf in the autumn wind. The scene zoomed in on me. On that face, there were no tears, no expression, only numbness. Below the stage, Isabella stood up. She looked at Julian on the stage in disbelief, her beautiful eyes filled with tears and anger. Julian, is this what you call saving? Is this the success story you're so proud of? Her voice was like a loud slap, hitting Julian hard in the face. Julian's lips trembled, looking at Isabella, then at his parents, who were close to fainting. No. It's not like that. Isabella, let me explain. There's a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Isabella scoffed. A live broadcast to tens of thousands of people. All the media in Jinghai City are here, and you're telling me it's a misunderstanding? After she finished speaking, she didn't look at him again. She turned and walked resolutely out of the auditorium. Julian reached out, wanting to stop her, but only grasped at air. He staggered, almost falling on the stage. He was done for. The perfect persona he had meticulously built for nearly 10 years, at this moment, shattered into dust. The instrument operator finally cut off the power in the backstage. The huge screen instantly went black. The auditorium lights blazed, blinding everyone. After a brief silence, the scene exploded. Reporters, like sharks smelling blood, swarmed toward the stage. Mr. Julian, is what was shown on the screen true? Did you know about the abuse at Anderson Correction Center all along, and used it as the basis for your theory? Aren't you and your family feeling any guilt, sending your own sister to such an institution? Security guards rushed forward, barely forming a human wall, protecting the teetering Julian and my parents. My father pointed at Julian, his lips purple, his whole body trembling. You unfilial son. What did you tell us back then? You said it was the best psychological counseling institution in the country. I didn't know, Julian roared, collapsing. How would I know? I thought it was for her own good. My mother was crying, unable to speak. She turned to me, crawled over on her knees, and grabbed my wheelchair. Ava. My daughter. It's Mom's fault. Mom is sorry. She wanted to hug my legs, but was separated by the cold metal of my wheelchair. I looked at her tear-streaked face, a face that was once filled with sternness and disappointment toward me. In my heart, there was no joy nor forgiveness, only a scorched, barren wasteland. In the midst of the chaos, the instrument, which had already been turned off, suddenly flickered again. Everyone was stunned by this sudden change. On the screen, there were no more electric shocks and beatings. Instead, there was a quiet school campus. The camera followed a girl in a school uniform, who was hurrying along, her face filled with anxiety. That girl was me at 18 years old. The time was 1 week before going to the correction center. Julian was stunned. He stared intently at the screen, as if sensing something, the fear on his face even greater than before. "No. Don't," he murmured. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." But it was too late. Everyone's curiosity was piqued. The part that Julian had deliberately skipped, that everyone had forgotten, and the true source of everything, was being presented frame by frame, in front of everyone. In the scene, I didn't go to internet cafes, didn't go to bars, and didn't hang out with those unsavory classmates. After school, I walked home alone. At a corner, I was stopped by 3 hooligan-looking boys. The leader, Vince, I knew him, was a sports student from the next class, a school bully. "Ava, have you prepared the money?" Vince asked impatiently. I took an envelope from my bag and handed it over. "This is all my savings. I beg you, give me back that thing." My voice was trembling with sobs. Vince took the envelope, weighed it in his hand, and smiled contemptuously. "Is this all? Are you trying to fob us off?" The lackey beside him chimed in. "Boss, why bother talking to her? Her brother is Julian, the student council president, an honor student. He must have money." "That's right." Vince slapped his head. "Her brother hit someone and tried to run away. If this gets to the school, his recommendation for university will be gone." Below the stage, there was an uproar. Everyone's gazes were like sharp swords, shooting at Julian. Julian's body swayed. He used his hands to support the table behind him to avoid falling. "No. It's nonsense. It's fabricated." He was still trying to defend himself in vain. The memory on the screen could not lie. The scene changed. It was a rainy night. Julian was riding a newly bought mountain bike, recklessly speeding down a small alley without streetlights. To avoid a puddle, he swerved suddenly, and the handlebars knocked over an elderly person who was passing by. The old man fell to the ground, groaning in pain. Julian was terrified. He looked around, and seeing no one around, his first reaction was not to help the old man up, but to get on his bike and flee the scene like a madman. And all of this was recorded by Vince, who was in the corner, with his mobile phone. The next day, I received a blackmail message from Vince. He wanted $5,000, or he would hand the video over to the dean. I knew what that meant for Julian, who valued his reputation more than his life, and for our whole family. I didn't dare tell my parents. I could only take out the pocket money and red envelope money that I had saved for a long time, a total of $2,000, hoping to appease them first. That's why I appeared in that remote alley in the scene. I was dealing with the trouble caused by my perfect brother. I thought that once I gave them the money, the matter would be settled. But I underestimated the greed of human nature. Vince took the money, but didn't delete the video. They intensified their efforts, demanding a second ransom, asking me to bring $10,000 in cash to the arcade in the west of the city for a transaction. I didn't have that much money at all. I was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot, and even thought about stealing money from my parents. Just when I was at my wit's end, Julian found me. He had noticed that I had been absent-minded for several days, and thought that something had happened to me. Looking at his unknowing, bright future face, I ultimately didn't tell him the truth. I couldn't ruin him. He was the hope of my parents, the pillar of the whole family. I just cried and begged him to lend me $10,000, saying that a friend's family had an emergency. Julian frowned, pulled out a stack of money from his wallet, and threw it to me. "Ava, this is the last time. I don't want my money to be used in some messy places." His tone was full of impatience. I took the money and went to the agreed-upon arcade. That was the first time I had ever set foot in such a place. The noisy music, flashing lights, and smoky air made me feel suffocated. I found Vince and gave him the money. He deleted the video in front of me. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned to leave this den of inequity. But at the door, I bumped into someone. It was Julian. He didn't know why he was there. He looked at me, and then at Vince and his gang of lackeys behind me, and the expression on his face changed from astonishment to disdain, and finally to utter anger and disappointment. "Ava, you've disappointed me too much." He didn't give me any chance to explain, and turned to leave. That night he went home and said to my parents, I saw Ava playing games with a bunch of hooligans. Thus, there was the double beating that followed, and the correction center consent form that pushed me into hell. The last of all the scenes froze on the look I gave back at the house when I was being pushed into the car by two men. Behind the curtains stood Julian. He looked at me coldly, as if looking at a dirty piece of garbage that had nothing to do with him. The truth was revealed. The entire auditorium was silent. All the causes and consequences, all the misunderstandings and frame-ups, were revealed in the cruelest, most irrefutable way, to the public. I was the one who chose to bear everything alone to protect my family. And Julian, this hypocritical savior, was the selfish, cowardly one who sacrificed his sister to save himself, the true culprit. The screen finally went completely black. As if a long movie had ended, Dad stared blankly at Julian in the center of the stage. He opened his mouth, making a strange hoarse sound in his throat. He couldn't catch his breath and fell straight backward. Oldly, Mom screamed and rushed over. The scene erupted into chaos. Medical staff, security guards, family members all swarmed forward. Julian stood in the center of the chaos, as if all his strength had been drained. He looked at his fallen father, at his crying mother, and finally, he turned his gaze to me. In his eyes, there was fear, remorse, and pleading. He took step after step, struggling to walk toward me. Ava. His voice was hoarse and unrecognizable. Cease. Sister was wrong. He wanted to touch me, to pat my head like he did when we were kids. I looked at him calmly, and then, in my ruined life, for the first time clearly and completely, I spoke a sentence. Don't touch me. My voice was a little weak, but it was like a thunderclap, exploding in his ears. He froze, his hand hanging in midair, shaking like a sieve. You can talk. A flash of ecstasy crossed his face, quickly followed by overwhelming pain. Ava. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know. With a thump, he knelt in front of my wheelchair. A young scholar who had been infinitely glorious just moments ago was now like a stray dog, weeping bitterly in front of me. Can you forgive me? Hit me, scold me, anything is fine. Please forgive me. The reporters' cameras frantically focused on us, recording this dramatic scene. I didn't look at him. I just turned the wheelchair and, under everyone's gaze, slowly left this suffocating stage. Behind me were Julian's heart-wrenching cries, my mother's wails, and the sound of the ambulance siren as my father was carried away. All of this had nothing to do with me anymore. The public lecture he named Emergence ultimately shattered his own false cocoon. And I, this butterfly whose wings had long been broken, could finally stop pretending to fly. That failed public lecture became the biggest scandal in Jinghai City that year. The Anderson Correction Center was sealed up overnight. Anderson and his team of instructors were prosecuted for illegal detention, intentional injury, and other crimes, and were ultimately sentenced to heavy prison terms. Dozens of families jointly filed lawsuits, revealing a corner of that hell, and sparking a citywide discussion about adolescent mental health and so-called correctional methods. Julian, on the other hand, was utterly disgraced. Jinghai University terminated his employment contract immediately, his academic achievements were revoked, and all cooperative projects were suspended. Isabella's family also announced the termination of their engagement in the newspapers as quickly as possible. Overnight, he fell from the clouds into the mud. Dad suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage after that public lecture. Although he was rescued, he was left with hemiplegia and could no longer speak clearly. Mom quit her job and spent her days in tears, taking care of Dad and facing the overwhelming public pressure from outside. They tried to contact me, calling, texting, even finding the temporary apartment arranged for me by the Survivors Fund. But I never responded once. Mom knelt outside my door for an entire night. She cried and said, "Ava, come home, the family can't be without you. Dad. He wants to see you." I listened quietly from behind the door. At dawn, I only sent her one message. Your family never included me. After that, they never came again. I began to receive real psychological treatment. The doctor said that my post-traumatic stress disorder was severe and would take a long time to recover from. But I was patient. I had already wasted 8 years, so I didn't care about spending another 8 years, or even longer. I began to learn to speak again, to eat in crowded places, to walk in the sunlight. Everything was difficult. But whenever I was about to give up, I would remember Julian's face as he knelt in front of me. That face filled with pain and remorse. This didn't make me happy, but it gave me a strange sense of peace. I knew that my pain had finally found its destination. It hadn't disappeared, just been transferred. The last time I heard news about Julian was in the spring 2 years later. It was from a journalist friend I used to know. He said that Julian had gone mad. After that public lecture, he locked himself in his house, refusing to see anyone. He would stay awake all night, talking to an empty room. All he said was, "I'm sorry." Later, he started having hallucinations, always feeling that there was a girl in a white dress standing in the corner, looking at him with empty eyes. He started self-harming, hitting his head against the wall, smashing glass with his hands. Mom had no choice but to send him to a mental hospital. The journalist friend sighed. "It's really retribution. He sent you to a place like that back then, and now he's in it himself." After hearing that, I just calmly said, "Oh." Half a year later, I received a letter from the mental hospital. It was written by Julian. The letter was filled with dense, crooked handwriting, with many places blurred by tears. The entire letter consisted of only 3 words. "I'm sorry." He wrote it thousands, tens of thousands of times. At the end of the letter he said, "Ava, if there are 18 levels of hell, I am now on the 19th. I can see you every day, see you screaming and crying in that room. I cover my ears, but it's useless, that sound is in my head. I now know that the most painful punishment in this world is not electric shock, not hunger, but to see clearly how ugly and dirty you are. If there is an afterlife, let me be that butterfly with broken wings. And you must fly freely in the highest and farthest place." The end of the letter also included a photo. It was a picture of us when we were kids. In the photo, he was carrying me on his shoulders, and we were both laughing like 2 idiots. That was the only photo our family had, not taken as a reward for good behavior, but simply because we were happy. I looked at that photo for a long, long time. Then I threw it and the letter into the trash can. I don't need his confession, and I don't want any afterlife. I just want to live my life well. Many more years passed. I can now live like a normal person. I opened a small bookstore in a small seaside town. Every day, I organize books, brew coffee, and welcome guests from all over the world. I still don't like to talk much, but the guests say that the coffee I brew has the taste of sunshine. I occasionally receive emails from my former psychiatrist. He will chat with me about my recent situation. He said that my parents had moved away from Jinghai City to a small county town where no one knows them, and are living on their pensions. Dad's health has not improved. He also said that Julian, after spending 5 years in a mental hospital, jumped from the top floor on a rainy night, ending his life before he even reached 40. It is said that when he died, he was still tightly clutching a candy wrapper, polished smooth from handling. That was a type of candy I loved to eat when I was a child. I finished reading the email and shut down the computer. Outside the window was the azure sea and golden beach. Several children chased and played by the sea, their laughter as crisp as silver bells. I walked to the shop entrance and took a deep breath of the salty sea breeze. The sunlight fell on me, warm and gentle. It's all over. That nightmare that lasted more than a decade has finally ended. Julian used his life to put a period on the sins he had committed. And I, after giving almost all of my youth, have finally found my own small, peaceful haven. I didn't look back. I just faced the sea and slowly revealed a long-lost smile. My life from today onwards has only just begun.